Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Therapy with Ari, where we talk about the heart, the mind, and everything in between. I'm your host Ari. Today, we're going to be doing a bit of a different style of video. We're going to be outside, so if you hear any background noise, cars, birds, lawnmowers, anything like that, I do apologize in advance, but I figured it's a beautiful day outside and it's a good opportunity to just be outside and get some sunshine. Today, I actually want to talk about a topic that has a lot to do with being outside and getting some sunshine, which is the topic of hobbies. It's been something that's been coming up a lot in my practice with people of all ages, actually, whether someone is at the end of their career and looking to retire, wants to know what to do with all this free time they finally gained, or someone who's been laid off and is trying to figure out how to keep themselves sane in the process of finding a new job, or whether it's someone younger who's either just starting their career or is in the midst of ramping up their career and has a lot to do at work and quite busy there, but doesn't really know what to do now with their free time at home. A family member of mine recently sent me a message asking me to make a video about what she could do to avoid falling into the trap of doom scrolling on social media, given all the current political upheaval in the world and all the social issues and everything else. She was telling me that she was having a hard time not letting it get her upset. And this kind of ties into that whole what to do with your free time, hobbies, all that whole thing, because, well, frankly speaking, if you have a lot of things to do with your time, you have less time to spend scrolling forever on social media. And so it's a question I get often, and it's one that's really hard to answer easily because, well, everyone's different, everyone's interests are different, their hobbies are different, the things that they like are different. So there isn't really a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but I do want to cover in this video a sort of strategy that you can use to figure out what it is that will work for you, what kind of hobbies you like, what kind of interests that you have. And I find one of the most challenging aspects of this process of discovering your hobbies and figuring out more productive ways of using your time is changing the mindset around what time means and how to appropriately use it. For a lot of us, time has been something that's been prescribed to us. From a very young age, as kids, we're told what to do in school, we're told what to read, what homework to do, what's important, and then we move straight into university or a job where a similar process occurs where someone else's goals are what we're focusing on and someone else's tasks are what we're focusing on. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not trying to say that people should not live their life like this. It's an important aspect of living. Humans are a cooperative species, so if we can work on someone else's goals at times, that's probably a good thing. The problem comes when we never really figure out how to decide what it is that we want and what goals we have and what it is that we want to achieve with our time. And really what we're talking about here is actually an emotional experience. Most of us really don't learn in our lives how to tap into that internal experience of emotional pleasure. What things do we do in our lives that actually give us pleasure from moment to moment? And this is a really important thing to focus on with this whole process is you're not trying to just find something to do with your time. You're looking for a very particular emotional experience, which I'll describe a little later exactly what that is, but that's what we're looking for and that's what we want to focus on. It's spending your time in a meaningful, impactful, and productive way for you. That's why this process is so personal, is that you have to really look inside of yourself and figure out what it is exactly that you want to do with your time. This is actually something that I have a lot of personal experience with. In my early 20s, I went through something similar where I found myself focusing a lot of my time and effort on work and work-related things, making money, that kind of a thing. Again, which is something that's absolutely important and fine. But I find myself not really having anything else to focus on that was self-improvement or fun or anything like that. And so it was sort of a strange emotional experience for me as I found myself achieving everything that I wanted to achieve or set out to achieve or was prescribed to achieve, things that I'd been told were important for success and happiness, but then finding myself in an emotional experience where I wasn't necessarily feeling fulfilled or happy that often in my life. So that was kind of strange to me, and it really forced me to think a lot about what happiness meant to me and what it was that I wanted to get out of life. So in this video, I'd like to share with you a couple of things that I learned from my personal experience with trying to discover hobbies, trying to change my mindset from that prescribed mindset to something that I personally chose and decided for myself. And I also want to share with you how it was kind of a difficult process for me, in the sense that you'd think it'd be pretty easy to just look inside and figure out what you like, but it did take quite a long period of trial and error for me to discover. And I don't say that to discourage you. I just want you to have appropriate expectations for what this process is going to look like. What's going to happen here basically is you're going to try 10 things and you're going to discard 9 of those things. And that's really fine. It's the first step in trying to figure out what it is that you really do actually like and what you do actually want to do with your time. So expect that going into this process. So the first step here is to find a whiteboard for yourself. And the reason why a whiteboard is important is because we're going to be making a list here, and we're going to be adding and deleting things from this list all the time. And this is going to take about a couple of months. So a whiteboard just helps to minimize a big, messy, scratched out, added whiteout. You just don't have to deal with any of that if you get a whiteboard. And so what you're going to do with this whiteboard is you're going to take a couple of days, maybe a week, and every single day, you're really just going to spend some time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day, thinking about anything that you're even remotely interested in learning, or you've ever had an interest in at any time in the past, or things that you did as a kid that you used to love to do, but you just haven't done in a long time. An interesting challenge that I came across when I was doing this process with people was the resistance people had to letting themselves dream a little in this process. I'd often get people to make a list and they'd come back with 5 or 6 things, and I always thought to myself, that's not dreaming big enough. Now, the reason why dreaming big here is very important is because there's all kinds of ways that you can convince yourself that you can't do one or the other thing. And so you never put it down on the list. And so you never even get to try to see if it's something that you like. Now that's devastating for this process. And what I'd recommend is that you just let your mind and your imagination roam free with this. I often tell people, come up with 30 or 40 items on this list. And I know if that sounds daunting, yeah, that should sound daunting. You're trying to discover new things here, so don't be afraid of dreaming. You can always take things off the list, but if you never add it to the list in the first place, then how can you get a chance to discover whether or not you like something? Make sure to not let this particular trap prevent you from dreaming big when you're making this list. So just as an example, some of the things that you might include on your list could be things like learning a new language, or learning a new instrument, or taking up a new sport or activity, or being a bit more social with your time, inviting people out for coffees, or even just learning how to be more social. That's a process in itself. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. And once you've got this list, then the next thing is to, try some things off this list whenever you have some free time or you find yourself scrolling on social media endlessly. And here's an important rule that I think is very complementary to this process of learning a new hobby. It's called the 15-minute rule, and it's very simple. When you're trying to start a new task, just tell yourself that you're gonna do this task for the next 15 minutes. And really, stick to that rule, 15 minutes. And the reason for this is because there's a huge resistance when we're sitting somewhere doing something comfortable like scrolling social media to get up and do something new. There's all kinds of reasons in your head. I have to get this thing or buy that thing or try this thing, or I don't know what to do, or you can come up with 1,000 reasons why not to do something. But if you tell yourself you're just going to do it for 15 minutes, it's much more likely that you'll actually start. And oftentimes when you start, that's the hardest part, is the hump of getting started. And once you get over that hump, you find the activity is actually pretty interesting, and one thing leads to another, and before you know it, you spent an hour doing something. So it's really important to try and stick to that 15-minute rule. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just spend the 15 minutes putting all the equipment I need in front of me or in the space where I want to do this task. So I won't even do anything related to the topic. I'll just get the things I need and I'll put them in front of me in the space, and that's my 15 minutes. And then I'll stop. That way, you never associate boredom or negative energy with doing this task. And that's an important part of it because, again, we're looking for an emotional experience here. We're not looking just to fill our time with a new thing that we don't necessarily like doing. We're looking for a moment in time where we're truly losing ourselves in a task, where maybe time is flying and we don't actually experience what's going on around us, where we're so focused on the thing that we're doing. Again, you can see how much effort I'm putting into just getting over that initial hump of getting started on something new. Believe me, it's the most difficult part of this process. And once you've got this list in front of you and you're putting 15 minutes of time here and there into each different task, you'll see how actually easy it is to continue with something that you genuinely find interesting. Which is actually the second step here, is you're gonna have all these items on a list and you're gonna have all these 15-minute segments of time where you're trying this or that or the other thing. So the next step is sort of cutting down this list from 20 items to 2, 3, 5 things that actually do regularly interest you. The method I used to cut my list down was what I call the 1 week method, where in a week I have all kinds of time that I'd like to spend trying to figure out new hobbies. So every time I had a moment where I figured, okay, I want to spend my time not scrolling social media or whatever time wasting thing I was doing before, I would just go to my list, I'd look at it, and I'd pick something that seemed like it would interest me in that moment, and I'd try it. And some things I wouldn't find interesting and I wouldn't try. And at the end of every week, I'd look at this list and I'd say to myself, okay, which one of these things did I actually do? And which one of these things that I didn't do? You know, it's really easy to sit there and tell yourself that you would like to be a rocket scientist, or you'd like to learn how to code, or whatever other thing your mind thinks is interesting. But the way that I decided to figure out what my heart wanted was by just seeing what I was actually doing, which seems kind of silly to think about after the fact, but when you think about it, that really makes sense. Your mind can tell you all kinds of things that are interesting to you, but what you actually spending your time doing is a much better gauge of what you're interested in and the things that will give you that feeling that we're after. At the end of the week, whatever things I didn't spend time doing or didn't like doing, I would remove from the list. And also at that time, if there was anything else that came up that I thought might be interesting, something I'd heard of or something I'd watched on YouTube or something like that, I would add that to the list too. And so over time, maybe the course of 2 or 3 months, this list shifted and transformed, and things that were at the bottom of it moved to the top because I was doing them all the time. And things that were at the top that I thought I might really like doing that I never actually ended up doing ended up being erased off the list. This is why the whiteboard was important, by the way. And just to touch on the topic of emotions one last time here, the most important thing about this is that you find something that is truly interesting to you, that you can spend many hours a day even on this hobby or task without feeling taxed or burdened or unwilling to get up out of your seat just to go do it. That's not really a pull experience. You want this hobby, this new thing to pull you towards itself. And the emotional experience that will do that is interest and excitement and fascination. And this is just the point here, is that it's not going to be something that you're going to figure out in one day. You're going to have to put a lot of time and effort into this, and for good reason. As I always say, nothing worth having comes easily or simply. You have to try and work on it, and when you do, you'll be pleasantly surprised. So thanks for joining me on another episode of Therapy with Ari. I hope this episode gave you some insight into how you can figure out a way to spend some of your free time more interestingly or more productively rather than, say, doom scrolling on social media. And I hope that this process is fruitful for you and helps you discover a lifelong hobby like I have.